Hello, everybody. It's time for another week of Game Wisdom Live. This is going to be for, of course, April Fool's Day 2018. Fortunately, Rob is now visiting family after he finished all his hard work on the Josh box. So he should hopefully be back next Sunday. But nevertheless, there is a lot going on here. I know, Gator. How are you doing? But this past week has been a bit hectic around here. I submitted the book proposal for the book about 20 essential games to study to a publisher, and now I am just waiting here to see what they're going to do with it. Hopefully, I'll get a response by Monday or Tuesday this week, but who knows? This Thursday, I'm giving my first presentation of the spring season on Ready Player One and virtual reality. So I've practiced it a few times, and here's hoping I can nail it for the first one. Then I have another one the week after. But with that said, though, with the start of a new month means new Patreon goals and hopefully new ways to get support going. Of course, if you missed the announcement, the Discord channel basic tier is now open to everybody. You'll find the link down below if you'd like to join us and chat industry topics on a day-to-day basis. But what I have right now is that we can hit $200 a month. The goal or the reward for this month will be a Let's Play of the classic game Rayman. One of the hardest 2D platformers around. Even if you know what you're doing, that game can still be a brutal one to play. And if we can hit, I think we're about $95 away right now. I'll be able to play that for next month. I'm also going to be putting together this week the first game design Q&A segment from the questions that were submitted, and hopefully that will inspire more people to toss questions at me. I hope you guys enjoyed my little April Fool's Day video I posted earlier today. That's probably going to be the last video for Sunday, as I'm going to be working on the dissecting design and maybe another triple jump spotlight for this week as well. In terms of games that are going on, I'm once again trying to play through Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I just ordered a Mario Odyssey, so I'll finally be able to play the other big name Nintendo game of 2017 and see how well it goes. Also, doing that video, I almost choked trying to drink the water like that. I don't think I've ever drank something that much in such a short period of time. I should have actually practiced that before I attempted that on video. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I finally got around to downloading some of the additional features to Audacity, so now I can just directly drop in videos and then extract the audio that way. That's going to make it a lot easier to do radio versions of the shows. I was thinking about doing that, the whole milk challenge, but I think that may have been a little bit more painful for me if I would have done that on video. But I'm also going to have a first look at Double Kick Heroes this week. It's a action rhythm-based zombie killing game, if you would believe that. And I believe Super Daryl Deluxe leaves embargo. Let me double check that. Because maybe I can do like just one stream of it just to show it off. Because I don't want to play through the whole thing, especially since people want to go through it. Yeah, it comes out on the 10th. And I have embargo until the 9th. So 1 week away. Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else game wisdom wise I want to discuss. Got the presentations, the book. Hey, Marks. I think that's it for right now. So again, for anyone who is new, be sure to check out the Discord link down below. And if you'd like to donate to the Patreon this month, that'll give you additional features, grab bag voting preferences, and if you get $5 or more, you'll get access to our design talks early and ad-free. Speaking of which, this week I'm going to be posting on Monday for the VIPs the live cast we did with the Dusk developer, and that'll go up free for everyone on Friday. But while it may be April Fool's Week, there were some serious topics going on in the game industry. One of which I want to talk about later has to do with where the water tastes like wine. But there's been more discussions regarding, let me see here, there was a piece a few days ago regarding Big Fish Casino being considered illegal gambling by Washington. That's very interesting. Hey, mister. And let's see. And a few more games went free this week, including Spec Ops The Line and The Darkness 2, which is very surprising. We're seeing more of that from Humble Bundle, I think, for spring, which spring is a nightmare for me. You may not be able to see it from where I'm sitting, but my right eye is flaring up right now. I think it's pollen and the whole changing of the seasons. Hopefully I'll get a chance to get my allergy shot this week, and that may help things a little bit. But I'm trying to see if there's anything else going on. The Nintendo Switch has hit, according to Gamma Sutra, where was it? 4 million sales in Japan. So it is definitely going up there. I know, Getter. I do get a little bit of glee about that myself. Let's see. I just saw some news I wanted to discuss. Maybe I mentioned it in the Discord. Let's see. A lot of more voices on there now, so I actually have to scroll up to find things I've posted. Here's one. Speaking about gambling, there is now going to be a waiting list or a waiting period for CSGO skins. That is going to be a big one for a lot of the I guess, quote-unquote, black market of skin trading that's been going on with CSGO. And I know Valve does something similar just for game trading or for trading cards, that unless you have access to the app or the secondary, I forget what it's called, security thing they have, you have to wait for trading on that side. Now I remember the topic I wanted to talk about. One of the more interesting things that's happened this past week was that another big name YouTuber slash streamer or Twitch streamer got caught saying some very nasty things on stream. I think it was the guy Ninja who was doing it during a Fortnite stream. And it's raising some of those more very interesting topics regarding what it means to do this stuff. Counterfeit Pogs. I remember, I think I do have Pogs around here too. There's another 90s reference for you youngins out there. But, getting back to the topic, it's another case of people arguing about should people be fined or punished for saying racist or hurtful things during a game stream. And of course, you have people on both ends of the extreme. You have some people who say it's the old-fashioned, boys will be boys, it's the heat of the moment, it's a 1 or 2 time thing in some cases, so why should you punish them? And then you have people who say they say something bad, they should be banned from Twitch, all their sponsorships should be gone, and all of that. And it's definitely a very interesting case, and definitely something that's unique for the time that we're at now. Actually, in the Ready Player One presentation, I talked about this, and how the book kind of predicted the whole video game players as celebrity trend that happened following the rise of YouTube streaming and Twitch over the years. Yeah, I know. Jake Solomon from Firaxis posted something saying he says it's fine to use the F word, which again, I try not to swear on these streams, so you won't be hearing me going too much in that regard. But yeah, going straight to racist terms, it just seems like an easy way to put a bullseye on your back. And again, it just hurts, I think, more than anything else. And I know there are lots of people who have done that on Twitch. If you've watched one of those Rage compilation or Salt compilation videos out there, I'm not sure what one of those would look like for me. I think it was just me going, ugh, just making those random noises. But I think what's also very, I'm not sure if this will be telling or just sad, is that the people who are caught doing this, like PewDiePie, Ninja, and other ones, is that it's people who prop up the ones who are the most popular without doing any real research. For those of you who missed it, Ninja was on, I think, CNBC last week after his big Drake co-op play. And I'm sure the people who were talking to him had no idea who Ninja was or what he was doing on his channel. But I did watch a few of his rage compilations, and he does say some very nasty things. But again, it calls into question, is it okay to promote people who do that? I mean, I was saying this on Twitter. If you guys want to talk about me where I don't curse, that's fine. But you won't exactly see me pulling in thousands of people watching me on a day-to-day basis. That's good, mister. But here's the big question that it raises. Do you call Twitch streaming and YouTubing, I'm not sure if that's an actual term or not, but do you consider that to be a real job? I know a lot of people who do it think that it is. They call it their business. They feel that it's life or death. They see themselves as, the auteurs of the internet. But can you really consider that a profession? Because it raises some serious questions about, is there a standard for what it means to go on YouTube or on Twitch and play video games for, I may do it for 2 to 3 hours, but I know some people regularly do it for 4 plus. And I know some of you watching this right now are probably saying, yes, Josh, why don't you go talk about game design for 5 to 8 hours a day? But I think that would be what will kill me. I think that's going to be the straw that does it. Yep. And that's another big point there, Getter. Whenever we have these discussions, you have the other popular critic or other popular defense. It's just people complaining about the changing times. And things certainly have changed. Again, YouTube has certainly came to its own over the last 8 years. And of course, with the rise of Twitch, I'm sure there's other platforms out there. And watching some of these streams, I only watch the Rage and the Soul compilations. Whew, man. You have more constitution than I do, mister. And that's the other big point there. What Getter just said, that these streams have become their own shows. And I know I did a podcast about this, I think it was last year. I forget who I did it with, but we discussed how much Twitch streaming and YouTube has really become of its own form of television. You want to watch a game or watch a discussion, somebody's probably streaming that right now. I mean, hell, Twitch did an entire stream of the Power Rangers at one point. I think they just did one of every Mr. Rogers episodes and one of Bob Ross. So, I mean, why should you pay cable bills for that? Yep. And that's true as well, King Me, that there's definitely that, there's different degrees of people who play. I'm definitely more on the small end of the thing, but there are people who get routinely several thousand people watching them on a day-to-day basis. I mean, small channels or small television shows would probably kill for that audience. And then you have bigger people who have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. But the question is, though, is there a standard for what it means to be a Twitch streamer or a YouTube streamer? I mean, when you watch people who are just, screaming and ranting, they're treating their audience like dirt. I've watched compilations of people who say stuff like, if I don't get 15 subs in the next 10 minutes, there's not going to be any more streaming for today. Just imagine if I tried to do that with you folks. Or just try to imagine if anyone tried to do that in a professional setting. Saying, well, if you don't pay me, 10 times what I'm asking for in the next hour, I'm not going to finish my work. That person will get fired very quickly. The same goes for the whole God complex that a lot of Twitch streamers and YouTubers have gotten, where, if you try to criticize them or say something, they will ban you or they will basically talk down to you, like, how dare you argue to me? And I was just about to get to that too, King Me. But it's the same thing that we see in a lot of artistic industries, where if you've ever watched any cooking shows where someone will argue or offer criticisms to a chef, they get this look on their face like you just killed their firstborn child. Yeah. And as King Me just said, there's also the idea of the quote unquote boob streamers, where women will take off their clothes or wear less and less revealing outfits as they play games. And most of the time, they're not really focusing on the games. And while Twitch has cracked down on the extreme end, there are still plenty out there. And of course, people will argue it's just women, showing their bodies, or how dare you criticize a woman for looking a certain way and all that. But it goes back to the topic at hand. If this is supposed to be treated as a business and given the respect and what's the word? Not provenance. Oh crap! I forget what I was going to say. Or the amount of clout that it deserves. We'll go with that. Then shouldn't there be standards to live up to? And of course, another major part about this is when you call advertisers and payment into things. And that's another big point. As anyone who watches a YouTuber knows, there's the big old YouTube apocalypse of 2017. And a lot of advertisers pulled out of the platform. It affected everybody differently. I think for myself, at my height, I was getting about $100 a month from YouTube. Now I'm down to about $48, $49 right now. But for major channels, those that were pulling in thousands of dollars, they lost easily 40 to 50% of their revenue. And at that point, that's, living wage money that they were losing. And that's a very serious point, because again, you can say whatever you want if you're doing things for free. I mean, if you just want to put a soapbox on the street and yell about, F this, F that, cursing, racist, misogynistic topics, you can do that. But when you have advertisers giving you money, when you have people giving you money on a day-to-day basis, that's a different story. Yep, and of course, same thing goes for the game industry. I mean, how many games are being released today that are making it hard to spot the diamonds from the rest of the crowd? I mean, again, I may just do this every week on Game Wisdom, on our live show here, but I can pull up the new releases and see just what crazy inane games are coming out. Yep. But of course, when it comes to the internet, there really aren't any real laws about that. Again, on Twitch, how many people are yelling and screaming and saying hateful things to their fans, and Twitch allows it? And the things that will flag people are so extreme that it kind of seems like you have to go out of your way to get in trouble there. I know, Getter, it can be tough to type sometimes. I made that mistake too. But while Steam is trying to pull things up here, what happened here? Get rid of that. It calls into question that if people are trying to make a living on YouTube and on Twitch and doing like that, should they be held to a standard? If you're going to go on Twitch or on YouTube and yell about politics or religion or say racist or hurtful things to people, should you be allowed to earn money through that? And of course, one part of this is free speech. But on the other hand, again, free speech does not call or does not lower accountability. But of course, that raises one other point. When it comes to platforms like this, they do lean politically in a certain direction. I know I don't like to talk about politics here, but it does raise that question. If the channel or if your site lean to the left or lean to the right, does that give you the right to squelch or punish people for talking a different ideology as you? And again, if there's money involved, that calls some very serious topics into question. Yep. Now, that is true to some extent, Indy, but I have watched people who are just horrible when it comes to Twitch or YouTube. They're either bad at games, they say horrible things, or they are just outright toxic to their fan base, and they still pull in hundreds of thousands of subscribers. They get routine subs and bits on Twitch. So there's an audience for it. But should there be an audience for that? Obviously, the cream will rise to the top as video games, as TV shows, and as movies. But if you give a platform or you give a reward for that kind of behavior, then you are passively cultivating it. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can also argue that the people who do that, there is a limit. Obviously, someone who screams and curses and is just outright destructive, they're going to pull in people from the entertainment purpose. But they're not going to be hitting, millions of subscribers and, retiring on an island somewhere with their Twitch and YouTube money. But when you have these people saying that what they're doing is a job and a profession, does that devalue the rest of what people are doing? When you have people on Twitch screaming that, I'm streaming for 8 hours a day and, how dare you not sub to me? That, it just seems very weird to me. And again, that could also be my old man factor as well. But when I play video games, if I earn money from it, that's great. But you won't not see me, yelling about tips and subs while I'm trying to play Darksiders or something else. I think I just described about 50% or probably more of the people on Twitch right there, mister. But one of the big things, and we mentioned esports a few minutes ago, I want to bring that up here, is that we are seeing the leagues cracking down more and more on this. Recently this week, a CSGO commentator was flagged for screaming some racial obscenities. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's the idea of people wearing, the Make America Great hats or having Pepe memes while they're doing professional plays. Yeah. And I'll get to that point again, Getter, in a second, but just to finish my line of thought, esports has become big money, and it has become even more so over this last decade, with the legitimizing of things like E-League, Evo, and even more in the mainstream. Now, obviously, for those of you watching this right now, you are all gamers. You've known about Evo, you've known about Smash, and so on for more than the last decade. But we're seeing that bigger push towards the mainstream. This past summer, I think they're still doing it, they've been showing regular esports tournament levels on TBS and even on ESPN2. And again, for us sitting here on Twitch watching this stuff live, we don't really care about that. It's, who cares? But the fact that this is now on mainstream networks is very big. And it's making things being more and more legitimized as a profession. This past year, there was the whole argument about, or there was the big thing, that esports players will now be earning competition visas or passports, allowing them to travel to other countries. And there even has been discussions of having a E-League or a video game tournament for the next Olympics. Maybe I should start training for that now, right, folks? But the point is, there is a lot of money being thrown into legitimizing esports and video game tournaments. Maybe speedrunning will be the next thing. But bringing this back to the topic at hand, when things are becoming legitimized, there has to be standards, whether you like it or not. If you're going to be going onto a network of hundreds of thousands or millions of people watching you with advertisers, throwing the big bucks at you, you can't be screaming and throwing a tantrum and, being, what's the term I'm thinking of? Not polarizing, being provocative when millions of dollars are being thrown around. And this is where I think the idea of a standard comes in. Again, if you're on Twitch and you're just ranting and raving on your channel, okay, immature, that could be a good one too, Chris. That's okay. But if you're on TV and, companies like, Oh wow, this is how bad I am at advertising. This is why I couldn't do, paid advertising, because I can't remember the advertisers' names. Here's my water bottle. Do I earn any money for that? But when you have that money being thrown around, advertisers don't want to deal with immaturity. Well, that would be an easy one. Here, Benny Q, that's my monitor. Do I get a free monitor now, folks? For those of you who watch Idiot Crazy, if I say sponsored by Corals Juniors, do I get paid every time I say that? But getting back to the topic here, they expect professionalism. And you can have people screaming and cursing and getting into fights because they lose a match and still expect to get paid the big money or get paid any money. When I spoke to other Josh and was discussing the idea of covering esports, we talked about how immature the professional fighting game community can be. Again, stuff like Evo was not put together by a major corporation. It was put together by fans. And because of that, it's very hard to get in touch with people and try to speak in a professional manner when you have them just playing games all day. And while they do bring in the money and are popular like that, they are not a professional business. And the same goes for trying to get in touch with speedrunners. Again, it's very interesting to me how different it has been talking to various people, not just in the game industry, but other industries as well. When I email a library, I expect to get an email from them in the next week. If I email a game developer, the professional ones, I will usually get a response in 2 to 3 days. But then there are people who I email and I get nothing back from them. And that's not how you want to be professional. Yep, exactly, King May. The whole Smash rage as well. Yep, and that's true too, Indy. But again, if you're trying to say that you're a business or you're trying to be a professional, you have to adhere to professionalism. I mean, I try to do that here. You won't be seeing me yelling and raging. I'm never going to insult people other than El Gordo because he's not here right now. He's, I think, partying or he's at a family or something right now. But the point is, if you want to be considered or taken seriously, you have to show professionalism. I mean, the stuff that I do on the stuff that I'm editing for the radio shows is another big example of that. And you're not going to, I try to hold people to some set of standards. When I email people, or when people email me, I do my damnedest to get back to them. Because I don't want things just to hang in the ether. Yep. And that's the point. You can certainly make a business however you want. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of crazy business schemes out there. And that's the other point. It just may not be a good business. If your whole business model is hoping people donate to you on Twitch or on YouTube, that's not really going to work out well for you unless you do something crazy. But we've seen this with the Rage and the Soul videos of how serious people try to treat a very unserious business. I mean, you have people who, when they lose a PUBG match, I was watching them. I was even watching that ninja guy on Fortnite where he lost, and all of a sudden he just started like spazzing out. He like jumped up and down, like ran out of the room. I'm just like, really? I'm sorry, but I know people overreact when they do this. But why would I want to support someone like that? Even if it is in jest. Yep. And that's another big point, as Gator just said, the scorched earth tactics. Yes, you can be a SOB and curse and scream all you want, but eventually it will come back to bite you. Maybe not in a day, maybe not in a year, but I'm sure most of you probably know of the trouble spots on YouTube and Twitch in terms of those streamers. That's a good point. Let me see. I'm going to scroll for a second because I want to see. No, it was after that. There's a point that I wanted to bring up. Was it Chris who said? Oh, no, I lost it. Just closer. Oh no. Oh yeah, I think we already know. We talked about esports. It was just after that, or just before that. Broadcast standards. This is a problem when you go on a discussion by yourself, folks. Now I can't remember my own lines. I don't have Rob here to to keep me on track. But when it comes to this idea of standards, again, it's just the Wild West when it comes to Twitch and YouTube. I remember reading I think it was either on Medium or on like Kotaku Destructoid, of someone who basically recruits Twitch and YouTube streamers and trying to build his own little brand about that. And again, it sounds crazy to have people who play video games earning, 20 to 30 plus $1,000 a year. And again, that's a part of that is the old person argument. But again, the other side of this is, are they being held to a standard? And should there be standards for what you can and can't do on Twitch or YouTube? Again, when it comes to Twitch, I have, but I can't remember what the actual topic was. But as I was saying, on Twitch, you can have people who will scream and curse and say all manner of things to the people watching them. But unless they say, a racist term, then it's okay. They can say everything they want, but the second they pull race or actual, body discussions into the argument, that's when Twitch flags them for harassment. But again, if this was a real job, imagine going into a McDonald's or going to the bank and the person saying, F you, and I'll get to this in this effing minute, you stupid blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm not going to curse. They would be fired from that job faster than you can say, give me a tip. But when you're on Twitch or on YouTube, you have people screaming, cursing, and then in this next breath they go, well, you're not giving me any tips, subs, or bits or anything like that, so why should I care about you? And it's just so weird, and yet they still get money. That's the very shocking part from sitting here. And it's not going to get any easier, because we see this pattern, it looks like every few months now, where a big name Twitch person or a big name YouTuber will get popular. They may get mentioned on a TV show, or they may get put somewhere else, and then something scandalous happens about them soon after. And the more this happens, the more I think it's going to hurt everybody, even if they don't see it yet. When a big name YouTuber or a big name Twitch person gets caught screaming racist terms and it upsets advertisers, guess what? That's going to go back to Twitch and YouTube. And what that's going to mean? Less advertising in the process. But it's one of those things where you can't really talk about it without basically throwing the other people under the bus. And I'm sure if I mention more names, I'll probably get called out for it in the coming week. But again, either there has to be standards or there has to be nothing. But then can you really expect people to get paid like that? Now, one last point before I move on to the other topic I wanted to bring up. People who say they get paid through Twitch and YouTube through ad revenue or by subscriptions and donations, that's not really a fixed income. Again, if you work a 9-to-5 job, or I do a lot of temp work, you are getting paid on an hour-by-hour basis. Thank you, Marks. If I scream at you folks, will you give me money? Yep. Too many standards, too little values. Yep, they make their own, but if you're making your own standards, can you really complain when you're not getting paid for it? But getting back to the point, is this really a full profession if you're not getting a routine or a fixed income like that? Or a guaranteed income, I'm sorry. I was watching a few of the more infamous streamers, I'm not going to name names so I won't get into trouble like that, who are saying that they complain where they play for 8 hours and maybe they get $5 of tips. And again, it's like, yes, you've played video games, but does that really justify people donating money to you? And before anyone comments, I know what the answer is. If you are entertaining, if you are, one of the quote unquote good ones, I didn't want to do the quote fingers there, they're not necessary, then yes, if people think you're worthy of money, they'll donate. I mean, it's why I have the Patreon up. Mm-hmm. That if people like what I'm doing, want to see it grow, they can donate to it. But it's not like I'm putting a gun to your head saying, if you don't donate money, I will never stream or do stuff again. It's more or less considered helpful. But if I originally tried to put all my stock in that, and that didn't work. And that's a very big lesson. You cannot, it's not sound business to put everything into one thing. I mean, that's why I'm doing the presentations and writing the book and trying to do more to spread out. Exactly, King. Nobody, and that's the same as me as well. You don't owe me money for watching me play games on Twitch, despite what DLC Quest was doing last night. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Blizzard or Valve. I'm pretty sure everyone owes Blizzard a piece of their soul at this point for all the time spent playing World of Warcraft, Diablo, or Overwatch. Or Hearthstone as well, I almost forgot there. But yeah, and that's another thing too, Getter. Probably too big to get into now, but there's also people who try to throw that in their audience's face, saying, oh no, if I don't get money, I'm not going to have food, or I can't pay my bill, so you have to donate to me. But even then, that's not really a sound business strategy, saying unless I get money playing Twitch all day, I lose my house. You haven't given your soul to Blizzard yet. Don't worry, Indy, you will soon. I think it's happened to everybody who owns a PC, or actually now a console, because Overwatch and Diablo are there. But we must have gone for at least, about 40 minutes. It feels like I just started. But there is one other topic that I want to talk about for this super serious April Fool's Day edition of Game Wisdom Live. And I'm actually not kidding on that one, because there is actually a very serious topic I want to talk about. This past week, the lead designer on the game Where the Water Tastes Like Wine put up a very sobering post-mortem on Medium, which I will put a link to in the chat. Hopefully that will work. You only play Universal Paperclip. I did play Loot Box Quest last night. But the idea is Where the Water Tastes Like Wine was a critically acclaimed game dealing with the idea of exploring Depression-era America to trying to learn all about folk tales and stories with a great soundtrack. And of course they had Sting as the narrator. And the game earned critical acclaim. I think it won several awards, and of course a lot of the game journalists talked it up. With that said, the game from the developer's viewpoint, or actually from the real viewpoint, it flopped. It has not earned anywhere near enough money. Oh, it didn't work? Oh, that sucks. Maybe if I get rid of... Maybe I can share it some other way. Share on Twitter. Oh. Nuts. It's not letting me, maybe because of the Twitch, or maybe just because of how it works. But if you search for Where the Water Tastes Like Wine on Medium, it will pull it up. Or if you go to his Medium, if you search for that name there at the @ sign. But this is a very big topic. Not just when it comes to making a narrative-based game, but also what it means to actually sell and do your title. And one second, let me pull this up here. There we go. And I have a Twitch channel. Let me see. I wonder if I can do that. Let's see. Alright, I just updated. It may take like a second to propagate there. I tried doing Twitch, but I just don't know if I have enough content that would make it Twitch popular, Indy. But for those of you watching who are new, let me know what you think about doing stuff on Twitch or staying on YouTube. You probably will have to do that, I bet. But getting back to Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, reading what he did or what he thought they did wrong, there are some major points here. And it actually shows again about just how much goes into making a successful game beyond just having an idea. And the first part that he went under the what went wrong section is very scathing. He mentioned, of course, no playtesting. And I want to read a quote from that piece. He said this: "When all the systems were in place, it was very late in development, and playing through the game took 10 to 20 hours. If you make a 10 to 20 hour long game, guess how long it takes to playtest? And so I only managed to do a few playthroughs of the game near launch. I didn't make time to send the game to friends and colleagues either. It was changing so rapidly, and I had so very much to do." And that is not good. That is a very big mistake. That's a beginner's mistake, and this is someone who originally worked on Gone Home, I believe. He was a part of that studio. And it is very telling that something like that happened in a game like this. As we said before, you need to playtest your title. You need to iterate on your idea. And I don't care if your game is 5 hours long or 100 hours long. You have to make the time for people to playtest it. I mean, again, if your game is 10 to 20 hours, I'm afraid that's not a valid excuse. Darkest Dungeon, which is an easily 60 to 80 hour long game, got plenty of people to playtest it. Duskers, which is a procedurally generated game, so it has infinite plays going, got people to play it. And you need to have those fresh eyes on your title. But more importantly, and this is what kind of raised a red flag in my head, a lot of the complaints that I had and that reviewers had in terms of UI, quality of life, and just the general gameplay loop, that's stuff that gets found out within, 40 minutes of playing a game. So even if people couldn't spend hours playing Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, he could have still gotten basic playability and quality of life issues just by showing it to people. And that's true as well, Getter. You can certainly go by the wing and the prayer approach, but the whole point of being successful in the game industry is mitigating risks and that random factor. And we've talked about developers who have gotten quite good at that. Whether it being Red Hook Games, Overkill Software, and just any... Cliff Harris, Jake Burgett, Fail Better as another big example. The studios who have managed to survive long, they've understood where those mistakes come from and do their best to avoid them. And again, stuff like playtesting, that is like line one of how to survive when it comes to being an independent developer. You need people to be looking at your game. And the other point that he said there, that I'm not sure those of you watching this caught, was when he said that the game was rapidly changing near the end of development. That is not good as well. We've talked about this before, that there's that popular expression, you spend 90% of your time on the last 10% of your game. That can be true. You want polish and iteration to be a big factor, but your game should not be rapidly changing when there's only 2 to 3 months left of development, or when it's almost done. There comes a point where you have to lock down your game idea. You can certainly add in new content, but new content versus new systems are two very different things. With Darkest Dungeon, yes, they wait until release to throw in the final dungeon, but that wasn't a brand new system, or the game didn't change outright from that point. And as Garrett just said, that's true. Fixed targets are better than moving ones. And we've said this before. I know we mentioned this on last week's show. But in any other consumer-driven industry, there is a literal endpoint. When a movie is done, when a car is finished, when a painting is complete. But video games are about moving targets. Or they can be about moving targets if you're not an expert at that, unless your game has no time to explain. And that's true too. But the point is, a lot of people get into the game industry without really understanding all the facets that go into it. And even AAA developers will run into this. It's easy to be a part of a studio of 50 to 100 people where you don't have to worry about PR or managing a budget or making sure everybody's on task. But when you're running a studio by yourself, that is a different story. And he mentioned that in the second point of what he felt went wrong, the lack of expertise. And he even said this, where, let me pull up his exact quote. He didn't know how to run a business, structure contracts, direct voice actors, market a video game, approach business deals, or manage contract employees. And again, as we said, you can certainly wing a lot of the stuff on your own. Diablo 3. But again, it's one of those things where if you don't know how to do it right, it will come back to hurt you. And yes, it can be stuff that you learn through experience, which seems to be the mantra of independent development. But for a lot of developers and first-time studios, they may not get a second chance to use everything that they've learned. And in some cases, they may not even learn. I posted it in chat, Drakon, but I'm not sure if it's working or not. Let me see. I'm going to try one. I did update the video description with the link. If you want to refresh the page, it may show up there. Exactly, Chris. That's actually a part of, in my book, I've talked about Diablo 2 versus Diablo 3. And Diablo 3, they certainly made a lot of mistakes there at launch. Thank you, Chris. But the idea, or getting back to the topic, just because I think we've said this before, what you don't know can hurt you, and this is very true, especially for anyone watching this who's interested in game development. I'll get to that in a few minutes at the end of once I get down to that part, King, on his post-mortem. But here's the thing, when he talked about the things that he did right, he mentioned stuff like music and gathering writers and vocals. But that does not make a video game. And what you just said there, Getter, regarding narrative games are dead, I actually want to end on that point. But again, if I'm not careful, I'll just forget all this stuff. How do you mitigate the mistakes? That comes from playtesting, iteration, and just really reaching out to people and having them look at your stuff. But getting back to his second point about lack of expertise. Again, this is why you need to be active. You need to talk to people. I mean, for myself, this last 2 weeks when I was talking about doing the book deal, I emailed a good 5-6 people just asking them, hey, you know about book publishing? Do you know about how to publish a book? What's this? What's that? I even have a friend who said that he'll look over the contract with me if we get that far with publishing the book. And that's important. And I've said this before, if you're not skilled at something, it's better to talk to someone who is knowledgeable in that rather than you trying to fumble around with it on your own. And playtesting, as Chris just said, again, early access has been a metaphorical gold mine for developers thanks to all the free playtesting they get. Again, I've spoken to developers like Jake Burgett, Tim Keenan from Duskers, I forget his name from Battle Brothers. Was it Johan? I'm pretty sure I may have just said insulted him, and I'm sorry about that. Abby Games, Adrian, and more, who have all said that early access has been pivotal in their success. Darkest Dungeon being another big example of that. I mean, how much playtesting did they get and had to alter their game accordingly through early access and even afterwards? And as we've said before, it is better to change your game in early access than try to change it at 1.0 or with a day one patch. Because once your game is out and it's considered release, it is basically open season for people to pick it apart. And I've said this before, when I play an early access game, I try to be a little less judgmental of issues with it. But when you tell me that game is 1.0, that basically says I can put my full sight, the Eye of Sauron, on that game and just look at every angle of it. Now let me see here. I'm trying to read this while I'm playing. Now his third point, loss of key people at the wrong time, that's not too damning on where the war tastes like wine. That can happen to any video game. I know it's happened to quite a few independent games as well. But his fourth point, this is the one that when I read this to you folks, all of you will probably go like this when you hear it. But the fourth point, what he did wrong, he titled it, Forgetting that the PC uses a mouse and keyboard. He designed Where the Water Tastes Like Wine to be gamepad first, keyboard and mouse second. And remember, this was a game that was released on the PC first. What about the wine tasting like water? I don't know how you make wine taste like water, indeed. That's probably another podcast in of itself. But let me get a quote for you. As a result, the controls were tuned and polished for gamepad, and the mouse and keyboard, while functional, were relegated to second place. However, we shipped on computers, not consoles. And again, this is one of those, common mistake but extra backwards. Yeah, I know. And that's the point. That is something for us sitting here, and for myself, that would be like building a car and not having a steering wheel put into it. That is just common knowledge at this point, or it should be common knowledge when it comes to game development. But again, when it comes to a lot of first-time developers or those starting out on their own, this kind of stuff, this is death by 1,000 cuts territory. Yeah. And it sounds like, again, for us sitting here, and with the ever-popular hindsight is 2020, we're like, duh, why didn't you do this? But for many independent developers, that's good when you stare down your touchscreen. But for many independent developers, you may think that you're trying to be artistic or you're trying to think outside the box. But as we said before, UI design, you do not think outside the box when it comes to your UI. You want to make it as clear and as simple for everyone to follow as possible. And again, you have to pay attention to these things. And this is another big point. If he would have play tested and done a lot more iteration, I am sure putting this game in front of PC gamers, the very first thing they would have said is, these controls are horrible. They don't handle properly. And for those of you who watch when we did the live play of Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, I think I even commented on that, saying, I'm just hitting keys on the keyboard, and, hey, there's a map. Where did this map come from? I don't know. Oh, man. This is a very... if you think that quote was good, here's another one. It also had more subtle effects. A controller only has so many buttons, and it's common to mash them all at various times to experiment with what the game can do, leading to natural discovery of under-tutorialized systems. No, do not do that, folks. Again, let me wave my arm so you guys can get this. This is not an April Fool's joke. Do not make your game so that people button mash to figure out how it works. No, don't do that. Your game should be intuitive enough, but there still has to be an understanding. Again, when it comes to a lot of video games, we have standardized elements. When I play a first-person shooter, I know when I move my mouse, that's going to adjust the aim. But you cannot expect people to just press keys and figure out what something does. There are even some parts of his game that are just completely non-contextual. Whew, that wasn't hard to say. Like doing the thumbs up or for hitchhiking. How are you supposed to know what that does in terms of the grand scheme of the game? Yeah, how to access the inventory. He even mentioned that on his post-mortem. Again, you can have player figure things out, like in Legend of Zelda, like making use of the various runes. But they still have the basic understanding of how to use that stuff. But when you literally hide your inventory button, that is not good design. Left, low punch, yeah. Sorry, I got a drink here. I'm extra thirsty today. I should have drank that whole bottle of water from earlier. Oh boy, and here's another big point. Here's something I'm sure none of you watching this have heard we talk about, but the idea that a game can take longer to make than you originally planned. He said, I assume it would be easier to create a game because he tried to make it simple. He said, my initial timeline was 2 to 2.5 years. Gone Home took about 1 year and 9 months to make. Where the Water Tastes Like Wine ended up taking almost 4 years to develop. And that is a very scary point there. The game is done in 5 minutes. When we talked about this last time, the longer it takes for your game to be made or to be finished, the harder it's going to be to recoup that loss. And any planned schedule for a game, it takes longer than you will always realize. I mean, even big name studios will fall into that. You can think your game will take a year to make, always plan to take at least 2 years. But whenever you try to do something on your own or you're trying to be experimental, that adds to it. Even if you're building off of a popular or a standardized blueprint, like a platformer, I'm sure people today think that making a 2D platformer is easy. And it may be easy when we compare it to, let's say, a open world 3D first-person shooter like Far Cry. But even something easy, in the grand scheme of things, still takes work. And more importantly, it takes work to do it right. It's the same thing with building a car. I'm sure any mechanic could put wheels on a frame, put a steering wheel on and say, it's a car. But there are only a handful of people who can build a car that takes it to showroom quality, or a car that people will be willing to spend thousands of dollars on. And as Draken said, 10 years for Owlboy. And thank you for saying that, because I almost forgot the point I was about to make. That's the other scary thing. People only see the finished product. They don't care if you spend 2 months or 20 years making a video game. All they can see is what's on Steam, or Humble Bundle, or on Switch. And if your game has problems with it, they are going to let you know, and they are not going to be friendly about it. And as we've said before when I talked to John Brieger, you have to be able to accept good criticism just as you can accept bad criticism. Not everybody's going to say, I didn't like your game because the controls are too bad. Maybe you should do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll talk about your game more. Nope, they're going to say, your game controls like crap, you stupid POS, you're a lazy developer, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell everyone not to buy your game. And that is also true as well, Chris. That's even just counting the people who are willing to leave you feedback. There is, of course, the grand or the large minority. I mean, I have it here. I'm talking to you guys, but this channel is approaching 3,000 people or 3,000 subs, and I haven't even heard from the vast majority of them yet. There are people who, and I do the same thing. If I eat a restaurant that I don't like the food, I'm not going to write a 10-page review of why I didn't like it. I'm just never going to go there again. And you will never hear from those people. Oh, and the chat is moving faster. It's great having so many more. The positive of having so many subs now is that there's actually a discussion going on, so I have to actually read it now. Yep. The story only has weight for luxury goods, exactly. I know, Draken. Yep. Problems have at least twice the weight, and that's another big point. I've said this before, you learn from your mistakes. I mean, that's what I try to do here with the YouTube channel with Game Wisdom. Being more vocal on Twitter, updating the thumbnails, trying to make things easier for you folks. Because again, while I may say, give me feedback and let me know, only a small number of people will actually do that. And again, it's kind of up to you to do the digging there. And yeah, a lot of people I think rely on early access, Getter, just as you said, because why should you have private builds and pay testers when you can just literally put your version on early access, charge, $10 and get thousands of people ripping your game apart? Oh man. As a quick tangent or a segue for a second, I just couldn't imagine doing these kinds of streams for 5 to 6 hours where it's just me talking. My throat is dying. We're just an hour in. At least with the video games, I can stop and let the game do the explanations. But I know I have water, soda. I need a mini fridge right here next to me. Maybe someone would like to sponsor getting me a mini fridge. How's that for some commercial advertising? Is it possible for people to treat early access as... Yes, that is certainly true, King. There are people who view early access as they are still expecting a quality product, or they will complain that the game is too long in early access. I see that with stuff like Besiege and Stonehearth. Yep. So there has to be an endpoint. But again, if you're telling people, or you have to be as transparent as possible. Like with Battle Brothers, they were on access for I think 3 to 4 years, and they were constantly keeping people updated. And if you're able to be that transparent, that can soften the blow. But if you just literally disappear for like 7 months, put a build out, come back, disappear for another 7 months, they're not going to want to trust you. And hey, Bradley, thanks for coming on. We are talking game development right now. I'm having a one-man game design presentation here. Now, here's something that I want to get everybody's opinion on from the Where the Water Tastes Like Wine post-mortem. His fifth point about ambition, he felt the game was too big. And that is something that can be up for debate. Because again, when it comes to narrative-based games, they may have a lot in terms of production values, aesthetics, vocals, and stuff like that, but they're very light on gameplay. And this is... that will take me to the final point that we'll come back to in a few minutes. But it's a lot harder of a sell, I think, these days for narrative-heavy games. Yep, and that's, of course, relative as well. One developer or one studio's grand magnum opus could be something that another studio does in 2 weeks or for a game jam build. And his sixth point, let me see how many points are left. This is the last one, then we'll get to near the end. He talked about 2018 being tough for a commercial game like Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. And that's a very interesting point. I want to ask you folks watching this live or recorded right now, what do you think about that? And yet, the console as well. I really like that game. But the question is 2018 really that bad for independent developers? And this is one of those points where, depending upon who's watching this right now, we may get some vastly different answers. Because a lot of people are willing to say, yes, it's bad for independent games. But the other side of this is it bad for great games? Or is it bad for games that just wouldn't be that outright amazing to begin with? And that's the other point King made, that a lot of people view narrative-based games as walking simulators. Yep, and Celeste certainly did succeed. Oh man, we're getting a lot of discussions here. That's great. But the point is it really bad, or is it becoming harder, or has that bar been raised more? Again, Celeste did really well. It earned multiple Game of the Year awards. It's on Switch now. Yeah, it's on track. But the question is, that's another good point there too, Dragon. It's going to be very interesting in 2019 if the Switch is going to be as popular for independent games. But the point that we're getting at is the cream, as always, rises to the top, just as we said in the last section. Games like Undertale, Darkest Dungeon, Stardew Valley, trying to think of some other big examples off the top of my head. The point is, these games are commercial successes, but you have to look at why they're commercial successes. As we said before, you can't just emulate another studio or another game and expect to earn that much money. There's a lot that goes into that factor. Chris just had a really good point. The game of the moment as well. The whole PUBG Battle Royale thing. Again, Fortnite is selling like gangbusters. I know this may scare some of you watching this right now. I was on the Fortnite page last night with my mouse hovering over the install button. Do I dare try and play Fortnite? Yep, and that's another good point there, Draken. That a decent game won't cut it these days. You have to go all out to make a popular game. But as we said last week, how far do you go? Do you do the whole, the pilgrims landing at Plymouth Rock and then burning their ships so that they are forced to live? The game of the moment, yeah. I'm just trying to read all the discussions that are happening right now. But the point is, yeah. I know, we're all tempted by those special games. And Getter has another good one. The cream only rises if it can sit a bit. That's true as well. Even the games that are what we consider big successes, just how big were they? I mean, we mentioned Celeste, but is Celeste known in the mainstream? The same thing goes for Undertale. We may say games like Five Nights at Freddy's or Celeste, or even something like Cuphead, were these amazing breakout successes. But there's a big difference between a game being a critical success and being a commercial success. And it's becoming very hard for games to be commercial successes. And this can even segue into the other topic about how game journalism can really fail studios. Because yes, it's great when someone writes an article on Polygon or Destructoid saying, I was moved by Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, or by Owlboy. But are they really giving the complete picture of what this game is? Because just because a site likes your game or it wins a Game of the Year award doesn't mean that the mainstream's going to pick it up. Yep, and that's another really good point there, Chris. Again, success is measured differently. If for one studio, selling 10,000 copies of your game could be life-changing money. For another studio, that could be considered absolute worst case scenario. Our studio has failed, we need to go under. When I spoke with Dave from Dusk, I forget the name of the publisher, maybe I can look that up quickly, who that video is going to go up soon on the channel. He mentioned how they could do more to try and make that game sell or make it more Steam friendly. But at the end of the day, they are pulling in more than enough to keep going. And that makes them happy. And they could, completely tear down Dusk, buy an Unreal Engine 4 dev kit, and make the game like that. But that will betray the game, and that will betray what the developer wanted. New Blood Interactive, that's the name of the publisher. So again, they are measuring success by how much they're putting out and what they're bringing in. And if they're earning enough to keep going, mission accomplished. Yep. Me too, Chris. Like for myself, if I somehow earn $1 million, that could pretty much last me a very long time. You're not going to see this whole place change into a mansion in like one day if I win the lottery. And the same goes for Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress has earned money, but it is not a commercially successful game. But the developers are earning enough to make a living off of. So for them, it's a success. And the bar has definitely gone up. Yep. And that's another good point. The race to the dollar, or race to the bottom, has been very damaging. I mentioned this on Discord, I think it was last week, but Prey right now went on sale for $15. And for those of you who are consumers, that's amazing. That's great. But how in the hell is a $60 retail game supposed to earn back its development selling for $15? Yep. And that's another big point as well, Chris. That's why a lot of people try to go in these ambitious ways. Because you never know what game's going to work. Who knew Flappy Bird would be the best seller? Did Rovio know that when they release Angry Birds, that would be their best-selling title? Farmville, Monument Valley, Hitman Sniper I think had like over like 1 million. Hold on, let me pull the exact number here. Hitman Sniper just passed 10 million people playing the game over 4 years. Yep. And again, you just never know when that big name game is going to work out for you. But because of that, it means you have to take risks. It means that bar has been raised. I said this before, but the days of you just making like a Pong clone or a Pac-Man clone, selling it for like 99 cents and at least breaking even, are gone. People expect, anytime they spend money, they expect quality. And here's the point that I wanted to make. Dig into ever more dangerous gold mines, exactly. And I think I may get into trouble here. But if I pull up here's a quick question, actually. Here's a pop quiz for the chat. Without looking it up, what I just described for you, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, being narrative heavy and driven, how much do you think that game costs? How much do you think it is right now on Steam to buy? And, we got some people joining Discord. That's where you're hearing those little buzzies, the little pinging. But while I'm about to make this last point, right now, for you folks watching this, without looking it up, how much do you think Where the Water Tastes Like Wine is right now on Steam? And to give you a point of comparison, when Gone Home launched, let me pull that up, it was at $24. It's now down to $15. Alright, Dracon says it's $10. Indy says $5. Full price premium. Marksman says $15. Well, I'll give you the price. It's $20 right now on Steam. And I just want to make sure that is the discounted or somewhat discounted price. Let me see. Steam is being very slow for me today. Come on. Exactly, Draken. No, that is its normal price of $20. And I am sure you're all about to know what I'm going to say next. I do not see $20 of game there. And that's where I think this argument about narrative driven games is. That a narrative driven game has a lot of the work of a full, gameplay heavy title, but you're missing half the experience. Imagine if Diablo 2 was re-released at $5. That would be interesting. But the point I'm getting at is it's very hard as money goes up. Yep. And again, I'm sure that's what he was getting at, Marks, that $20 makes it seem like a premium offering. But there are plenty of games of higher quality or equal quality for $20 or even less. I mean, to give you an example, my second favorite game of 2017, Asura, which is a roguelike ARPG, is only $10. And that has a whole lot more gameplay to it than Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. Celeste, I'm pretty sure that's $14. Oh no, that's $20 as well. I'm sure it was on sale though for I think $15 or $14 so when I got it. But that's normally $20 as well. And that's a game that is a full-on platformer. There is a lot of gameplay there for someone who wants to play it. But here's a question. Do you think that narrative-driven games are dead? Or do you think that market is drying up? Because I think for people who are expecting a narrative-driven game to be making as much as a premium title, I don't think it's going to work. I think that you have to set your sights lower. It's the idea, for you, Indy, it's the idea or it's the marketing strategy of saying that you're making it at a higher price to convince people that there is a premium, that there's quality there. It's kind of like for myself, when I give my presentations, I quote a somewhat reasonable price. I can't go to a library and say, I'm going to put together this amazing presentation, everybody's going to love it, and I'm only going to charge you $20. Because the thought in someone's head is, if it's $20, just how good is it going to be? What's the catch? It's kind of like the opposite of the good deal. And you have to be really careful because, again, as we all know, price does not dictate value when it comes to video games. I mean, hell, people are loving Fortnite for the fact that it's free. True, Chris, exactly. I'm sure, people, if you put up a diamond ring for $2, not a lot of people are going to buy it. They're going to be thinking, why? But $500 will seem like a ripoff. Yeah, that's that push and pull. You have to figure out just what is the right price for your game that people will see that's a good value, but they're not going to think that they're being ripped off. And again, I know, Indy, you're probably going to ask that. How do you decide that? And again, it is a case-by-case, game-by-game basis. Yep. And Bradley, for you, I'm sure there are other games that are priced at $1 that people will say, you're ripping us off. I would only pay 50 cents for that game. Why don't you make it free? I mean, we see this on Steam all the time, that people will put on posts or put on threads saying, this $20 game, lower down to $5 and you'll get more people to buy it. Well, that is certainly true, but you have to understand both the market and how much you're actually going to get in value. Yep, and you can certainly get focus testing like that, Draken, that you can ask people how much they're willing to pay, but you also have to weigh in everything. Yeah. And again, that could easily segue into another topic of mobile versus PC. Because, yep, exactly, Chris. I know I keep saying that, but will 4 times the buyers make up the loss? This is a very big point for people who go on Humble Bundle. You may think that having 500,000 people buying your game on Humble Bundle is going to make you lots of money. But there's a big problem with that. A lot of people are spending $1 And that dollar is being split 3 to 4 different ways. So you may end up with, what, 10 cents a copy sold. And not a lot of developers can live off of 10 cents per game copy. Yep. And you have to understand how to market and budget your game accordingly. Atlas being a very big example of this. Anyone who is an Atlas fan, the Japanese developer and publisher, knows that they have gone to great lengths to minimize costs when it comes to their games. It allowed them for the last decade to really succeed with niche titles. They knew that Nocturne or Persona 3 wasn't going to pull in Call of Duty numbers, so they budgeted the game accordingly. They knew how to market the game, and for a time, until they really blew up in the mainstream, they were known as the company that you either pre-ordered their game or you weren't going to play it. And that was actually an effective marketing strategy. I knew that when I pre-ordered Persona 3 or Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga, that if I didn't pre-order that game, I was not going to find it in 6 months to a year. And it's now, since then, since Persona 5 has become really popular, and even Persona 4, they can be a lot more bigger now. I think they're even owned. Didn't Sega Sammy buy Atlas? I'm pretty sure they did. And again, there's so much we could easily jump into. And my goodness, I've been talking for almost an hour and a half straight. How did that happen? But let me see if there's any other parts. Oh, you're going to love this. Card processors would be... I'll let Chris explain, because I only know it from hearsay. But getting back to Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, I want to read this entire paragraph. So far, I have made $0 from the game. That may look like a high number, but consider that it took 4 years to make. That works out to approximately $0 a year, compared to the $120,000 a year salary of a 15-year veteran in a AAA studio. It begins to look a lot smaller. And then if I go into the hourly breakdown, I don't have an actual count of hours spent making the game, but there was a lot of crunch that went into it. So I am guesstimating I made about $0 an hour. That's not a lot. And then once you factor in the $140,000 I spent paying my contractors and collaborators for the game, you begin to see that maybe it wasn't, financially speaking, worth it. So, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, it has not done well. And we can argue that a lot of that could have been not having the expertise. But then there is the market for it. And this is kind of the problem when it comes to making these games. As Getter said earlier, the fact that developers are being forced into going to quote-unquote riskier gold mines is very telling. I mean, so I create my own visa. I'm afraid that's a topic for another kind of podcast, Cindy. But again, most independent developers don't have accountants and lawyers on staff to handle this kind of stuff. And as we said, all these little things that you don't know can kill you if you're not careful. Oh. And I don't... And like looking at what he's saying, again, like he said he spent 4 years working on that game. And here's the question. How many people really see 4 years of work in Where the Water Tastes Like Wine? I don't know. And again, while it may be a critical success, if you look at their store page, they have quotes from the Washington Post giving it a 9 out of 10. But again, what does that really mean? The quote that they use, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, is a giant leap forward for video game storytelling. Okay? But what does that mean about the video game? What does that mean about playing the game? And I hate to say it, but this will be the final point that I want to end on. And Getter again saying the big thing, time doesn't equate to equality. Yep. But the big point that I want to end on is that just because let me rephrase that. The big point is this. At the end of the day, people are expecting to play a video game. And I know there are a lot of independent developers who will fight tooth and nail whenever there's arguing about what is or what isn't a video game. But at the end of the day, though, the market and the consumer base expect something playable. Saying that your game has an amazing story, that may sell you some copies, but if you're expecting to earn the same amount of money that a game like Cuphead or Celeste or even Undertale did, you're not going to get that. And Undertale is an example I wanted to mention, because Undertale has earned a lot of success for its storytelling. But there is still a game as the foundation. And even if a lot of people choose to ignore or downplay it, you can still play through Undertale. But how many people are willing to play through Where the Water Tastes Like Wine? Stories don't sell experience, yes. Yep, that's another good one there, Getter, as well. Tell it to George Lucas. But I think that people, when we say that there is a video game, there is a definition for a video game. People want to play something. Even something like that Doki Doki Literature Club had some basic gameplay to it. And if you don't want to have gameplay, then don't sell your video game. As we've said this before, video games are an art and a craft. But that's another big point there too, King, that yes, your game may have a critical, successful story, but I can watch that on YouTube unless people take it down. You know, they take it down due to DMCA's. But the point that I was getting at is the second you attach a price tag to a video game, it's a product. And as we've said this before, you have to weigh what the game that I want to make versus the game that people want to buy. Sometimes those two coalesce, like with Dark Souls, or Celeste, or Undertale, or even something like Five Nights at Freddy's. But other times, you have to pay attention to what people are saying about your game. Because, as we've said this again, even if you and your 10 friends love your game, that doesn't equal, hundreds of thousands of people liking your game. Minecraft, another big example. Minecraft worked because they made a game that they wanted and everybody loved it as well. Stardew Valley being a big case. And I think that's one of those, this is another topic we could segue into, but this is one of the big allures of independent game design. You are making the game that you want to make. And like we said with Stardew Valley, he made that game. He spent 4.5 years of his life making that game because he wanted to play that type of game. And it just so happened that a lot of other people wanted to play that game. But conversely, what if he made that game and nobody wanted to make it or play a Harvest Moon style game on the PC? He could have lost his house at that point. But you have to weigh all this stuff in. And the reason why the independent scene can be seen kind of like a shotgun approach is that when you are trying to make a video game that you want to play, sometimes that resonates with a lot of people. Sometimes, like I said before, I would love to play a city builder. A over-the-top city builder, and I may get that game someday. Somewhere there may be an independent designer thinking just the same thing as me, and maybe they will make that dream game. But will that dream game resonate with a market? And for a lot of independent developers, again, we've said this, they view any kind of market testing, PR, focus groups as, the devil. you're selling out at that point. But if you want to make a commercial success, you have to understand what makes a game commercially viable. That could be very interesting as well if Patreon and crowdfunding has also been, say, not good enough for you. No, I'm afraid not. But crowdfunding has been another big point of that. Games we've talked about so far with Kickstarter, that Kickstarter has allowed developers to say, I want to make this game, and people throw money at it. And in that case, if they do their job right, they may just earn enough to break even on just the patronage of that. And then the added bonus of selling the game can go even further. I don't know, Draken, and I'm kind of afraid to look that up. That may throw a flag up on my channel and on my search engine there. But to wrap things up here, I think, for tonight, again, just because you want to build a game that you want to play doesn't mean that everybody else is going to fall in line with that. And that is a great follow-up from our previous point about Twitch streamers and YouTubers. That has also gotten a negative stigma from a lot of people who do shady things or who are toxic. And, well, actually, Getter, there was that whole big scare in 2017, if you remember, that Patreon was changing, that people who were donating would have to spend more money. I mean, I lost a few people from Patreon who never came back because of that. So you gotta be really careful with these platforms, because it doesn't matter how trustworthy you are if the platform is viewed as being skeevy and stuff like that. This is why a lot of people are very hesitant on early access. I'm sure a few of you watching this right now have probably sworn off ever playing an early access game. And that is certainly fair. If you get burned by a developer that you trusted, why should you trust somebody else? And again, all this stuff can come back to bite you. It will reach a head. And maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but again, as I always say, I am very curious to see what independent studios are still alive in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. And even if you've had a big name success, that doesn't guarantee that you are going to be successful after all that time. But with that said, we are an hour and a half into me talking nonstop, and I need to take a break. So we are going to wrap things up for this week's Game Wisdom Live. I just hit my knee on my own desk there. That was smart. So thank you for everyone new and old watching. If you haven't checked out the Discord channel, again, it's linked below. For those of you who just came in late, the Patreon has been updated for April. If we can hit $200, I will do a Let's Play of the challenging game Rayman. And be sure, if you would like to see that, to donate. And if you have any suggestions for goals or rewards, again, the vocal minority, please let me know. Or if you're part of the non-vocal majority, please let me know as well if you're willing to chat. And I think you have maybe a day or two left if you'd like to get your name on that thank you page on Patreon that goes up during the pre-streams and recording videos. So if you'd like to do that, if not, your name will show up for next month. But otherwise, I will see you all later tonight for our I almost said Darkstalkers play again, Darksires Let's Play. And I'll be back next Sunday at 3 o'clock p.m. EST for another chat like this, hopefully with Rob recovering from family and work. So, have a great night. Be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And I'll be sure to let you guys know what I hear from that book publishing deal. So, until next time, have a great day, and don't get too fooled by April Fool's announcements. Until next time, take care.